Greetings, this is Griff Ruby with part 11 on my series of Sedevacantism, the Catholic Perspective. I want to continue brushing up a little bit more from the last couple of installments in which I've talked about the acceptability of Catholics, real traditional Catholics, nevertheless attending masses that traditional masses that would be, for example, the Motu and also the Pius X or some other independent priests who are not Sedevacantists, and namely to show that though I think they're taking the inferior and more dangerous course, that doesn't mean that they are not Catholics. There are a number of historic precedents, and to this I must give a certain acknowledgement to John Daly, whose research has been very helpful to this particular point. In an article he wrote, Heresy in History, he itemizes more than a dozen instances in church history where known, visibly public heretics were allowed for some period of time to continue as such while the church waited for them to get their act together, and during which they were still allowed communion and fellowship with their fellow Catholics. They were still allowed to continue as bishops or priests, whatever their office was. And ultimately, after that time, either they do repent, that's great, or in other cases, the church would ultimately have to judge them and create them and list them as heretics, officially declare them as heretics, after which now you might not be able to continue with them. They wouldn't be holding authority, and there might be other effects of the excommunication depending on the individual excommunication. So that's an important precedent for today. A good historical example would be the one of Bishop Nestorius. Now, most Sedevacantists have read on the story that Bishop Nestorius had decided one day to become a heretic and start teaching all this heretical teachings. But, and a lot, as we know, many of the Catholics that had formerly belonged to that diocese had to say, well, an emperor have we, but no bishop. And why the Pope isn't mentioned in that, I don't know. But anyway, the point of that statement was we do recognize authority, but this bishop, we believe, does not have it. It's like we are without a bishop, as it were, because he had really vacated his post by becoming a heretic. But not all Catholics did that. St. Hypatius was an advocate of that position, but another Catholic of Bishop Nestorius's diocese, St. Eulalius, took a different opinion, and there were some like him who continued to think, well, the church hasn't removed him, he's still our bishop, we're not going to go with his heresies, very important, but he's still our bishop, and we have to work with him as best we can. So that was also a legitimate thing. And what's even kind of interesting is how St. Hypatius and Eulalius, despite their violent disagreement on this point, never questioned each other's belief in terms of their connection with the church. You know, Eulalius didn't say of Hypatius, oh, you're outside the church because you're refusing subjection to the bishop. And Hypatius didn't say to Eulalius, oh, you're outside the church because you're having your communion with a known and evident heretic, which you and I both know to be heretical. You see, they didn't do that. They disagreed. Each said the other was wrong on this or that point. But they were legitimate opinions within the church. And because of that, that meant that Catholics could be either way, as long as they didn't go into the bishop's heresies. So that is an important lesson for today. And in fact, as I said, John Daly had a lot of cases where it was the same thing. But that's a good precedent for today. It means that those who go to a Motu Mass, a Pius X Mass, even though it may have varying degrees of communion with the evident heretical leader of the Vatican organization, does not mean that they are non-Catholics or that someone else is a non-Catholic for defending them. Sometimes you get some extremists who really will say, oh, well, if you don't believe my position, whatever it may be, you know, oh, well, you don't want to be under, you know, Benedict the 16th or whoever it is at any given moment, you're outside the church, or on the other side, oh, you're with those heretics, you're outside the church. You know, say those kinds of extremes are not permitted. So that's one lesson. another lesson to draw, for example, from the case of Nestorius, and now I'm going a little outside John Daly's research here, but I'm pointing out here too, is that nevertheless, though the church obviously accepted and affirmed, if only tacitly, that both those who followed St. Epithius and those who followed St. Eulalius were equally Catholics, and neither side required any abjurations or anything else to continue as Catholics and to be recognized as Catholics and buried as Catholics. But at the same time, the course that St. Epithius had taken was deemed the more correct and prudential course. So that really is the better way to go. So that is why a worthy motu mass, one with a real priest. I know one where there was an independent priest who, well, he was ordained by the church way back when things changed. He kind of got pushed on the sidelines, said mass somewhere, wherever, for some number of years without any recognition. And then when the motu came along in 2007, a local Novus Ordo parish allowed him to be their motu priest. Now there's a case where I don't see any reason why a real Catholic couldn't go there. But I realize not all situations are the same. And the same would go for the others. Pius X or Pius V, CMRI, Trento, other traditional priests and their societies, and other traditional Catholic clerics. They too can oblige. And we'll be talking about that obligation in future installments. Thank you.